Welcome back to the Brew podcast. My name is Jacob, and we're joined by a packed crew, if I say so myself. We got Owen, Nate, Evan, Sam, and Jacob all joining us. I feel like it's been a while since our first 6-person crew, at least from the start, without people joining and leaving.
Yeah, and at least we don't have everybody packed around a kitchen table with one microphone in the middle.
I don't know what you're talking about. Those went great.
while we're banging on the table.
Yeah. And people are having side conversations.
Exactly, yeah.
And Jacob Latour peeing in the bathroom right next to where the
That's right.
Hey,
and
no,
Evan,
that was
Evan in
Evan.
the kitchen cooking and banging pots and pans. Just look at our
Me
earlier
being-
episodes.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. There's one of the episodes, I'm going to let you guys figure out which one it is, where I was actively hungover in the episode and left at one point to go dry heave in the bathroom.
I remember
exactly
that.
what
episode.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I remember you acknowledge it the next episode. You're like,
Oh,
just
did
so you
I?
know.
Okay, there you
Yeah.
go. So, yep, now you know.
Yeah, that's our living journal diary almost of our senior year of college.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Different
And
times.
beyond.
That's for sure.
All right. Well, so it was my turn to come up with a topic for this week. And I wanted to try to think of something that would be fun and lighthearted, considering, we just talked about how we decide our value, and we talked of, I don't remember what else we talked about, conspiracy theories. I have a short-term memory. But it's all this serious stuff that just makes me super existential. So I was like, all right, I'll think of something super lighthearted, just so we can, get our energy back after these existential conversations. And then some Mandalorian stuff happened in the middle of the week. How many of you have watched The Mandalorian, out of curiosity?
I've watched the second season.
Evan,
Yeah, I've watched all of it.
how have we not talked about that?
I'm early into the second season.
So, and I know, Sam, you mentioned that you've only seen headlines about this, but earlier this week, so Gina Carano, formerly, she was WWE, or not, she was UFC, not wrestling, right?
Yeah, she was a MMA fighter.
Right. So she played Cara Dune on The Mandalorian for, I think she was in like 5 episodes. She was recently fired by Disney because she said some, how do I put this lightly, not great stuff. Specifically, throughout the past however many years, she said a lot of racist or transphobic stuff. Clearly, not dare I say, she was like talking anti-vax and anti-mask and stuff like that really openly.
Yikes.
And so for a while, there was a lot of fans of The Mandalorian trying to be like, hey Disney, what if we just get rid of her? She's not that great of an actor anyways. But what finally broke the camel's back is about a week ago at this point, when she posted on Instagram about how it's as hard now for Trump supporters as it was for Jewish people during the Holocaust. And so Disney was like, hey, don't do that, and fired her. And so it kind of brought up a lot of things about cancel culture just in society today. So I wanted to talk about that this week. Not as lighthearted as I was hoping, but it's hard to avoid talking about cancel culture nowadays. And so just to get us started, basically a day after, I think it was a day after, she got fired, she announced that she had signed on for a new film project with Ben Shapiro, and the Daily Wire, which I don't know
Oh my god.
what that
I
entails.
thought you were going to say she was going to be a journalist for Fox News. But either way, it's good stuff.
Yeah. So
Oh
I
my
mean,
goodness.
yeah. So it's just interesting because, like, we talk about these people who are quote unquote canceled, but in cases like these, especially in cancellations that are somewhat politically charged, it's just she gets fired, but then she just goes right back to work, and perhaps has even more of a voice because now she has people paying attention to her. And there's this quote that I pulled. I don't know. I got this from the Hollywood Reporter. I don't know where she posted originally. It might have been on Instagram following her firing. But she said, "I have only just begun using my voice, which is now freer than ever before, and I hope it inspires others to do the same."
Mm-hmm.
So she was canceled and fired from The Mandalorian. But was she really canceled?
Yeah. Well, she wasn't canceled from like the Fox News Ben Shapiro listener, right?
Sure.
I mean, then maybe they know more of her more now, but I think that's kind of like that's the change to cancel culture that has happened in the past, like, say, 5 years under Trump, basically. Which is, I think cancel culture used to be, I remember like people getting like cancel Colbert trending on Twitter, which was kind of like a joke, I think, in a way, but
Right.
or at least some people thought it was a joke. But I think it used to be that like we thought that the mainstream political and or social opinion of America was a lot more progressively minded than it was. And so when people got canceled, there was no like Fox News existed, but even 5 years ago, they weren't as bad as they are now. I mean, they were still stoking the fire and kind of building the snowball that they are now being crushed by, which, sucks to suck. But I think honestly it's different now because of like these alternative platforms which are getting uh so much traffic, and now it's like more than ever you don't have to listen to anything that you don't agree with. And so if Disney, which I think wants to be for quote unquote everybody, decides, you know what, if you're going to say inflammatory racist remarks like that, then you're off the team, which fair enough to Disney. I mean, they clearly don't want the bad press, and there's a lot of money in the Mandalorian. So, but I think honestly nowadays when that happens, it's like, well, you just change your audience. And now you're just talking to the Fox News Ben Shapiro viewer / listener.
And that's a lot of people.
And that's a lot of people. I mean, that's at least 73 million or however many, we know that much voted for Trump, right? And probably a lot more. So
well, we can't say all Trump voters, completely believe in everything that the right wingers like Ben Shapiro and people like that say, right? I mean, is it safe for us to say that all Trump voters are in that category?
I guess not.
Okay saying that. Like, I'm completely okay with putting everyone in that category, but that's half of America, or half of voting America, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the tough thing. But I think that my main point is basically just that it used to be, I feel like it used to be that the cancel culture was that you're canceling it from the one culture of, American culture. You're canceling something from American culture. But now it seems to be more like, well, now you don't get to pretend that you're apolitical. Now you just, your audience is now a politically based one.
And I completely agree with that. But I also want to add that I think previous celebrities and previous people who have been sort of canceled before this, era, not era, but before this most recent time, have been people who either raped people or people who molested children. Like these were problems that weren't partisan problems, right? But
Right.
now cancel culture has now turned to uh, uh, somebody saying that was racist, and then do like the difference between an exposure of a rape or an exposure of a racist moment that a left or a right could deem different, right? So that's the difference that we're seeing now. So so like Harvey Weinstein before, R. Kelly before, what was that comedian's name? I mean, there's tons of them out
Louis
there that have been
C.K.?
canceled for the right reasons. Crosby, right? All these people that have been canceled for the reasons that neither side, right or left, if it's political, can say, like, actually, you're not canceled. But now we're getting to a point where it's almost completely politicized, right?
Yeah, that's something I want to bring up because when you talk about the Me Too era, there were a lot of maybe some sincere apologies, but a lot more insincere boilerplate, like "I'm sorry you took it that way," and things like that. But with this,
Right. Or legal statements.
exactly, and so with this more recently, with things like with people like Gina Carano, it's not that they're apologizing and trying to learn from their actions, which is the goal of anybody who is quote unquote canceled. Is we hope that they're able to learn from their mistakes and become a better person out of it. They double down now instead. And so, Evan, I want to move this to you. I want to ask you: do you think there is a better way of quote unquote canceling someone? Because right now, canceling just means separation without anyone learning anything. Like, we're just becoming more separated without anyone learning anything. And so, is there a better way to do this than just tweeting campaign and then they're fired?
God knows. It's that's kind of my issue maybe with using a blanket statement like, oh, well, all Trump voters then should be canceled because that's half of America, right?
Sure.
Right.
And so to separate yourself from that large of the population is it's just going to like further polarize us. And when we talk about like communities that we should be spending the time supporting, it should be either disadvantaged or people that are moving into this country. Like, we shouldn't always have to be like trying to compromise with people that have a lot of power in this country or have the ability to educate themselves, but continue to not time and time again to choose to. So if there's a better way to do it, I would love to take the really maybe naive approach and to come at it like kind of like a way that I was talking about with the conspiracy theories, and that you would sit down and have a conversation about it, and try to reach them more on a human level and try to take down barriers, yada yada yada, and try to make it more of a learning experience than actually separating the person.
Well,
At this point, I am not. I mean, look, honestly, I'm always going to believe in that. But at this point now, if we want to just keep it in the political realm for a second, it's been 5 years. And if you voted for him again after saying all this, it is difficult for me to find a way to be sympathetic to that. Now, if you voted for that because you really felt that the promises that his campaign made were going to better you and your family and your community, because you felt like you weren't supported by the government on a whole, okay, I can somehow sympathize with that. But if that leads to direct attacks on others and other people's rights, I can't be sympathetic towards that. I really can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also the original premise of cancel culture was that part of what you were saying, Jacob, is that people will learn from it, or that's the goal. And I think the original critics, and I remember feeling this way as well, is that original critics of cancel culture, the people who said like this is a bad habit, like we're gonna regret this. I think part of that criticism was that it would become a political weapon.
Right.
similar to like it would just become part of the political kind of gamesmanship that goes on in this country. And I think it's become that way because now, yeah, it's now just part of. I mean, now politics is everything too, right? So I think it's become swallowed up by it.
Yeah, a lot of this dances around the edges of a sort of fundamental difficulty that runs through more and more things today, which seems to be the difficult problem of how do you bring someone to the table to have a discussion from which both sides can learn and evolve and, as somebody put it earlier, become better people for gaining that perspective. And getting someone to come to the table and have that conversation who has no interest in doing that is the grand difficulty.
Yeah. I was gonna say there was a time, I think, what the actual cancel culture started maybe 5 or 7 or something like that years ago, right? At least in mainstream media. And then after a couple of years, it was like, well, actually, we shouldn't cancel people. We shouldn't cancel groups. We should try to figure out a different way because canceling doesn't help, right? Because we noticed as soon as we canceled, it became a partisan issue, and it seemed as though the left was canceling more people on the right, and then the right had a bigger audience to then gripe about freedom of like stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then more recently, it's come back into play. And I think it's primarily just because of how polarized our country is becoming and continuing to become. In that, it's almost as though if somebody on the left doesn't cancel someone for their actions, then they are now a sympathizer towards those actions, right?
Right.
And it further divides us, which is just a tricky and very hard situation to be in.
Absolutely. And that's a similar thing runs through like the impeachment votes, where you know the Senate's not going to convict, but how can you stand by and not take formal objection to what has been done and stand up and say something about it, even if it goes nowhere?
Yep. Yep. And this is my own my own opinion on the whole impeachment process, but in watching the second impeachment process, phenomenal display on the side to say Trump should be impeached, right? I think the amount of evidence and stuff is there.
Insurmountable.
But in the back of my head, I'm thinking there's no point in having this trial because there's just the
We
premise
know how it's going to end.
exactly, and the entire the Senate isn't going to. They're just not going to because they think it's unconstitutional to have it after the president has left the office. Like that one sentence is the entire reason, at least from my understanding, of why he was acquitted, just because he wasn't in office.
That was the
That's
excuse.
sort of the reason you can hide behind. And
That one sentence, after several days of showing the most influential graphic and data and all of this stuff, that was just, oh, I don't know. I need to mute myself here for a second because it's just overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, that impeachment trial was a difficult exercise in kind of the more social version of what we're talking about with cancel culture, right? I mean, that was the fact that politics is the game that we all now play all the time. I think there was a time, and maybe this is naive since I never lived during. I have not lived in any other time but now. But
Well
I
said.
think probably and actually I think there's evidence for this, but that politics has become more and more part of everyday life, where it once was kind of an aspect that only cropped up in election years or with big issues, and that largely people did not find it as part of their lives. Like people didn't base who they're friends with, or who what shows they watch,
Right.
or what actors they employ based off of their political opinions. And, for good or worse, some of that allowed people, who were horrible monsters to work in the industry.
And
But,
shape the industry, inform the
right,
industry, and probably be one of the causes for why we're in such a difficult position here
right,
currently.
right. Something
Yeah.
I think but I don't know if, and maybe that negative outweighs the positives of having a more free and open social culture, and that didn't care as much about politics. Maybe that's the price you pay, is that you end up letting people slip through who should not be, um, who are people who hurt other people. But I'm not sure. There's not a clear answer to me there.
No, as soon as you say that those people aren't allowed to have the same avenues, now you're encroaching on their amendment, their freedom of speech. That's the
Right.
problem. Is that you're either allowed to say whatever you want to say, and
Yeah.
get canceled by the left, or you can be as you can sympathize, you can be empathetic, you can be somebody who, okay, now I'm going off the rails, but do you understand what I'm trying to say though?
Don't go
Yeah.
off the rails,
Yeah.
Nate.
That's the problem, and I
Sure.
hate
You-
to bring this up,
Yeah.
especially now, but you're talking about how we are allowing certain people into an industry and to shape an industry. And although he just passed away, Rush Limbaugh was the person who was so damaging for years
Yeah.
on public radio,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that is also the change in the recent years, and part of that political game is that now the right has a social media culture. Whereas, I think this is still the truth, but mainstream media is just largely dominated by progressive thinking, generally liberal-minded people. And I think that's probably just a product of the kind of people who are interested in media arts. Or just maybe it's just the culture that is always there. And maybe, honestly, maybe that's even naive to say, because maybe, like when John Wayne was making cowboy movies, maybe Hollywood wasn't so liberal. But I don't know. But I think at least that has changed in my lifetime, which is that it used to be like, there was mainstream culture and that was leftward leaning. And then, there was private culture, traditional culture, which was right leaning. But now with Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire and Fox News and Rush Limbaugh in the past 20 years of kind of blasting of this right-wing media stuff, now there is a different audience
Sure.
that didn't exist maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah. And that's the tricky thing about these more recent cancellations is the political implications of it. But I have another example I want to talk about that it kind of heads more towards the artistic side of it. So there was a game announced back in October, I believe it was October 2020, called Hogwarts Legacy, and it's made by a game studio called Avalanche Studios. I believe they're based in Colorado. They're making this. It looks like a really cool open world Harry Potter game where you're just a student at Hogwarts and doing all these things. And it's scheduled to come out in 2022. The problem there is J.K. Rowling exists. And she, if you're unaware, and I'll just say this quickly, you can look it up rather easily, but she has a history of saying some transphobic, I believe she also some racist things. And so that's kind of the moral quandary with this instance is this is a game made by hundreds of people who just want to make a cool Harry Potter game, but it's all based off of the back of someone who has contributed so much hate and like hateful speech into the world. And so, Jacob, I want to direct this to you. It's kind of the age-old example of the question, can you separate the art from the artist
Yes. I think you definitely can separate the art from the artist. Now, I mean, reading all of Harry Potter's works, or sorry, J.K. Rowling's works and all of Harry Potter, that's an I think an important part for most of our lives because we all grew up reading those stories and watching the movies from that. And I don't know. This is a question for all of you guys, but within the stories, is there? I don't know this myself, but is there um, controversial ideas inside of it?
Here's one for you right off the bat. I think there was maybe one or two uh, people from Asian descent, maybe Chinese, and that one person's name was Cho Chang.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Nate, I was just
Mhm.
looking that up. Yeah, that was just what I was thinking of.
And that's the first thing that pops into my head because there's one person, and that's their name. I'm sure there's others hidden in there.
There's one example I can think of where the bankers of the Harry Potter universe are heavily depicted as like kind of Jewish stereotypes, but are
Yeah.
goblins.
Goblins.
Um,
They have like big noses. They have it's yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it's hidden and it's kind of implicit in many ways, but it's there.
Yeah, but for
I didn't
for
even
me,
think about that.
the work that she had done before that, so like all of her Harry Potter books, I hadn't heard anything that she had done which was controversial until many years after she had written those books.
yeah,
And so, Jacob, I think that's more of the question you're asking, and but it is very difficult because on one hand, these Harry Potter books are super important to my childhood, and yeah, it's hard because I love those books and I grew up with them, but it's you can't also support the person now that came from that. But it's hard because like the I would totally play that Harry Potter game because while it's the source material is from her, it's it's completely their own project. It's not a reflection of who she is as a person. It's these completely different people, and it's not a reflection of her values.
sure.
Do we
So
know? Does she get any profit from this game?
probably.
I don't. Yeah, probably. They have said that she has no direct involvement with this game, but you have to imagine just the fact that it's using the Harry Potter license, she's going to get something from it.
Royalties from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was actually looking at was James Gunn.
Yes.
Just because how I do think a negative part of cancel culture is Owen and I have talked about this a couple times that our society in general has become much more sensitive in that we're not allowed to have these open discussions. And Sam alluded to that, it's we can't sit down with other people and feel open and feel safe to have these controversial discussions and discourse. And James Gunn is an example of having safe discourse, but more of with cancel culture, it's not allowing people to redeem themselves, to grow from their past actions. And I don't like that aspect that it's not a society where it's encouraged for a person to learn and to grow.
Sure. Yeah. And I think if you're not familiar with the James Gunn situation, James Gunn directed both Guardians movies, is directing the third and Suicide Squad, and has done other things beyond that. And with his situation in particular, it is interesting because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding, he made bad jokes at the expense of gay people, I believe, and tweeted them. And I believe this was the late 2000s, or I guess it must have been early 2010s, because Twitter probably wasn't around back then, and then subsequently apologized for those. And then years later, this was probably 2018 at this point, where James Gunn said something left-leaning on Twitter, and so an anonymous right-wing person just trudged up these old tweets and brought them back up, and so then he was back in the spotlight for that reason years later, having, if based off of his work, seems to have grown in that regard. And then he was fired after that. And it should be noted that he was then rehired after some frauding. But it is interesting that, one, it's just the publicness of social media, that all this stuff is out there for someone to find. But mostly it's the fact that you can have said these things years ago, grow as a person, so that to the point where you acknowledge for years that what you said was wrong, and then it just gets brought back up, and your career is dampened because of it. Not over, because obviously he's still working now, but yeah, that is an interesting point to bring up.
Yeah, because it was Gunn had made these statements criticizing Donald Trump, and the pro-Trump commentator was Mike Cernovich, and Gunn had written these all the way in 2008 and 2012, and yeah, they're definitely these horrible topics that include things such as it was jokes about rape, 9/11, child abuse, and also pedophilia. So they're absolutely horrible. And right after he made those statements, you're right in that he apologized publicly, and throughout the years kept on apologizing.
Can I make a snarky comment here?
Yeah.
Always.
So Jacob, you basically just said, Jacob 1 or Jacob 2. You basically said that when some people are canceled, their career and everything drops and they lose their fan base and stuff like that. That only occurs. It depends on how brainwashed and how loyal their fan base is. So if we're going to talk about Trump, who in office has had so many things blow up, and yet still is able to win 74 million votes at the next election. So cancel culture doesn't always work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting for it to work on some people and not to work on others, right?
What I was trying to say is it's built purposely to just shame and not actually make a person reconcile with the wrongs that they have done.
It seems like it seems like cancel culture is beneficial for its potential to make people think before they act. Right? Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, okay. Yeah, I think we should point out, though, and I think this is what Jacob was getting to, that there's two types of thinking before you act. One is maybe this is kind of hurtful, and maybe it's not as funny as I think it is, and you know what? I don't want to say something that will cause somebody harm, or that is, I don't actually believe this that much. And then the other kind of thinking before you speak or act is, shit, maybe somebody's going to get mad about this, and then they're going to take away my movie rights or my job, or maybe they're going to, come after my book or whatever, and maybe it's best if I just stay under the radar, and I'll just say this in private, but I'm not going to post it. And I think both of those come from cancel culture, and the problem is the second one, because that's where, if you're not allowed to have a public discussion that allows people to grow, then
Mhm.
that means the only discussion that you can have in public is where you get, lambasted for your
Mhm.
views. And so what it ends up meaning is that people who think these things, or are happy to say things that are inflammatory, or um, are said, you know what, I'm not going to say it. I'll just keep it in my own head, and I'll just say it when other people who agree with me are around me. And then you don't have that open conversation where you're fighting against ignorance, and you both hopefully learn something, and then you end up maybe being more respectful next time, because you never have that conversation in the first place because you think, I'm gonna get
Right.
canceled. Um, and I think that's the problem, right? That's the politicization.
Mhm.
Um, and It's a tough question to answer, because it's hard not to see some of these bad jokes or bad tweets and go, "Oh, that's shitty. No, nobody should hear that, or nobody should say that." But at the same time, I think you have to risk those shitty statements in order to get to more respectful discourse.
It's easier.
Yeah,
It's easier when you're not a celebrity, when you don't have a following. Like for instance, if
Right.
I said something
Mhm.
horrible on accident, I would hope that my friends and the people around me would come and say, You screwed up, Nate. Like you should not be saying that." And
Hmm.
I would hope that that conversation would happen. Unfortunately, that conversation doesn't happen for celebrities when they post things and do this and have stuff living online from 10 years ago, because then the masses just attack, and then they've been, in quotes, canceled, right? So that
Hmm.
conversation doesn't happen.
Right. There are examples of this happening to normal people. I mean, there was that woman who, I honestly, it could be I think it could be a lot worse, but I think she made a joke about getting on a flight to Africa, and like, something about like AIDS, or I don't even remember what it was. I think this was also early days of Twitter.
Mm,
Um, but she lost her job because of it. I mean, it went viral. People like retweeted it and called her out, and then
yeah,
her employer fired her. I mean, this is like that. So it does happen to normal people too.
yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah,
I don't remember what
Mm.
her name was. I remember hearing that story. I think that was also 2012 or 2011,
It
somewhere around
must have
there.
been amplified by someone who had a large following, though, right?
Well, or just the kind of Twitter algorithm that, some things just
That's
go
true.
big, right? You know.
It would be interesting to know of a cancel culture before social media, right? Because before we had the ability to just throw anything we wanted online, or have it live somewhere where masses could see it. I wonder if there was some kind of cancel culture before that.
Yeah, I don't
That's
know.
a major enabling factor to all sides of this is that prevalence of the online platform and the huge audience and immediacy and overwhelming amount of reaction from all sides that allows for. I think more to your question, Nate. I think it becomes very interestingly much less of a massively charged and enveloping thing if you take away that platform, and that's where you go back to those instances more like what you were mentioning with if you accidentally screw up and say something, the people around you and close to you have a chance to come to you on a level that perhaps harkens to the approach Evan was giving us earlier, where you're one human being talking to another with all those inherent commonalities shared, and you can have that more intimate conversation about it and an attempted understanding that does not get bombarded with this mass input. I mean, who knows how that ends, and case to case, and if it's on the whole, if things are allowed to exist in that environment that are more exposed and therefore not allowed to sort of fester because we have the internet platform and all the modern connectivity to bring those to attention. What are the ups and downs to it is a big complex discussion, but
Right.
Yeah. So I guess how do we, if cancel culture has shifted from the idea of trying to help people change, how do we, and it's shifted to the what, just kind of adding to this separation of sides of left and right, how do we rein it in and get people to understand on a grander scale? Because obviously, like Evan said earlier, it would be great to have these one-on-one conversations to talk to people, but when it's as big of a scale as it is now, where now Gina Carano is fired, but now she has this whole new audience with the Daily Wire, how do we get back to this place of understanding and listening and learning from one another?
So okay, so two things, and I think it kind of makes a point for the previous discussion. Yes, there should always be instances where people should be able to make mistakes and learn from them. Absolutely. But the point of cancel culture, right, is to make sure that when somebody says something so fucked up and so vile that they don't have the opportunity to continue that kind of harassment and hate again, right? So that is the power of cancel culture, and that's what it should be used for, right? So, and maybe there needs to be two different powers in terms of that. Maybe for everyday people that make maybe a mistake, and I honestly
Problem with cancel culture, you get one or the other. You
okay,
I'll be more options, right?
I'll be more defined. Yeah, if you're someone in power and you say something really fucked, let's take this mayor in Texas. What did he tweet the other day? He was like, "I'm sick and tired of people asking for handouts when literally people in your city are freezing and they don't have running water." Yes, he should have lost his job, and he did. Right? He resigned, and that is right, and that is great, and that is a form of cancel culture where someone in power has said something terrible, and in a democratic way that the people should kick that person out. Great. If it's a person that is not in a huge amount of power, that is an everyday person, and they have made like an honest mistake, then yeah, that would be a greater opportunity for learning, or at least that's how I see it.
I like that assessment of it, Evan. I think that's a great kind of metric. The only problem I see is that, and this I think honestly speaks to a larger American issue, but that there's like either, how do I say, either you open the can of worms and you decide that yes, we are going to cancel people, and we're going to so now there's a line somewhere, right? We have to draw a line. We have to judge situations and say that was right, that was not right, or you don't. And before, I think social media, we didn't, right? People got away with things, but also, like I was saying earlier, there wasn't that kind of conversation in our day-to-day lives. But I think the overall struggle is that there seems to be an American value that, you know what, if it's a difficult can of worms to open, and there's no history of us dealing with it in the past, it's better to not open the can of worms. And I'm not sure that that's correct. I know a lot of other countries are like, no, we have to deal with this. And they get it wrong sometimes, but they deal with it. Whereas I think the American response sometimes is, well, that's a really difficult problem, so actually we're not going to deal with it. And freedom and liberty and blah blah blah, but we're not going to deal with it.
What I'm hoping for then is that if we start to move towards more of like, okay, like shit, like we need to deal with this. Yeah, you're right. It's not going to be like a black and white. Like, there's not going to be a definitive line of being like, okay, this person needs to be cultured. Okay, this person needs to have time to learn.
Right.
But what I'm hoping for, and what is kind of what I'm hoping is a positive takeaway from this, is that society evolves over time, right? And we saw this, like what Jacob said with Harry Potter. Like, when it initially came out, people didn't really raise a lot of issues with it, except for some of the Christian communities that said it was like demonic.
Oh yes.
But whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. We'll just leave them on the side, I
That's
guess.
you don't need to talk about that.
Yeah. But over time, right, we've become much more self and socially conscious. And so what I'm hoping for over time is that we as a society are going to grow to be more equitable and more conscious. And not only the instances of cancelings will go down, but knowing in that kind of gray area of like, oh, okay, so how do you respond in this type of situation, will become a lot more common sense.
I like that.
I like it. And perhaps along with that, we need a public space for like a public, like, you know how Oprah did all of her great interviews with people, like, you know, people who had cheated, or like I'm thinking of Lance Armstrong, but like people who had done like horrible things, and like you watch the Oprah interview and she's like, she's kind of amazing in a way, because she like gets them to just be open about it, and then they have a conversation, and then at the end of it you kind of think better of both of them. You're like, wow, that was actually constructive, and I think maybe everybody learned, you know. So maybe we need more of a public space for that kind of thing. Maybe, is Oprah still doing shit? Maybe we gotta get her back on the air.
Isn't it?
That would be great, especially if it was open to not celebrities as well, right?
Right.
Don't, like, you know, like those people have the power. They're gonna find some source of outreach that will want their story. There should be those public spaces for everyday people. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Right. And with that, I think something that really exemplifies is the presence or recognition of a huge and cross-sectional bunch of the population who share a common recognition of someone or something that is a respected ideal, be it in a moral sense or as sort of a societal common point that we can all point to and say, yes, we all agree with that, and we can work together to hold some sort of common frame of reference that will allow for these civil conversations and learning therefrom. In effect, if you're starting to draw lines through what's okay, what's not, you have to have a certain threshold of recognition of the authority who's doing the line drawing. Otherwise, people can continue to disregard that and say, "Oh well, I don't have to listen to that. I'm going to go live in my own half of things."
So Sam, can I kind of push you on that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if we are getting our news sources and our realities from, you know, if we want to put into politics, two extremely different sources, right? That's turning into that our realities and that our baselines are not the same. How do you then go about it? Because if we can't even agree on a threshold of authority, what is there to build off of?
Right. That is the big question right now, as I see it, for a lot of things, is that how do you even begin to reconcile these two sides that have grown so far apart and have all but completely eroded these spaces of middle ground that can serve as theaters for these discussions. And I wish I had a good answer for you. I'm not sure where you start. There's an end point of that start that is in itself a new beginning to branch forward from, but getting to that point is something I think we all are still trying to figure out how to do. And
Yep,
some people
right.
seem uninterested in doing even that, which makes it all the more difficult.
Yeah, to
Sure.
go off
And
that, what you just said, uninterested in doing, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there is a political side that's an enabler, and that's allowing us to continue or allowing people to continue to be racist and continue to say whatever they want to say because it's our freedom to do that. And I think the side that wants that to be I just feel like as long as there is a political party that says we're allowed to do whatever we want and say whatever we want, and we're American because of that, it's going to be completely and utterly polarized, and we're never ever going to be able to fix the situation.
Right. And that goes right back into what we were discussing earlier and what Owen was mentioning about how politics now is the game that we all play all the time, and it didn't used to be that way. And I think, Nate, what you've gestured to there is a segment of society who has said, okay, if you want to speak in these ways and be bombastic and potentially hurtful to others and not regard that, we will defend that in the political arena for you and give you sort of a quote unquote legitimacy and something to say, well, these people say it's okay, so I'm going to keep doing it.
And you're more
And that's
American because you're saying that. Like I feel
right. You would,
I feel because I don't say whatever everyone else says or whatever, that I'm less of an American or I'm less of a patriot. I'm less of a person in our society in America because uh, because I don't just say whatever. I try to think about things that aren't going to hurt people, and I try to think before I say things, right?
Mm.
But
right.
because I
I
do
mean,
that, I'm less of an American, and
that's the
that's
thing.
the problem.
Right, that's a big part of it, and you see this in other places. Not to sidetrack us here, but just to mention briefly, that was one of the tactics in the whole most recent Catalan independence referendum. Was, oh, you're a good Catalan, you're a good American, you are patriotic. We'll steal that label for our side, and if you don't follow us, we're going to exclude you from that label. And yeah,
Maybe just like for context and as a disclaimer for those that may be listening, we are 6 white guys in our early 20s, right?
point.
And um
that's why we're on a
so
podcast.
yeah, exactly. So when we talk about cancel culture, we're coming at it from our own experiences and these different realms of privilege that we um, uh, live in, right? And so I think it might just not just us, but maybe just anyone that is having these conversations about cancel culture, to really think about when these statements are made, um, the people that they're affecting, and trying to live in that kind of experience.
Yeah.
And most of what I say, I completely understand that there is implicit bias within my own words because of my lived experiences and the person I am and the color of my skin and everything. And I think that's important to acknowledge as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say the similar thing. And that, yeah, not only is it good to let everybody, hey Key, listening, um, but also that it's good for us to know, like, man, we're just 6 idiots talking about some shit,
That's right.
and we don't know what we're talking about. So, yeah,
We're all just figuring it out together.
there's no assignment at the end of the podcast. There's no lecture here. Yeah.
That's not to take too much of an academic bent, but that there's a good, probably partially well remembered by me, paraphrasing of Socrates, I think, that says, I have wisdom in that I know what it is that I do not know.
Yes.
And just to be able to acknowledge what it is that you yourself don't have the authentic perspective on, to say that I know there's more out there, is an important thing, I think.
There is an interesting thing, and completely non-academic, like that offshoot from what Sam was talking about. Elijah Hall, one of the best things I remember him telling me, he was like, full straight face, man, I absolutely hate old people. They're just so racist. And something something that I've always thought about is eventually we'll be older, and I'll without even realizing it, I'll probably be racist. And
No,
that's
no, 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 no.
no, I'm
No,
thinking.
no. You will probably say things that aren't with the times or with the language. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be racist. It just means that somebody thinks that you're going to say you're saying something that's offensive.
Well, so a good example is when I was dating Alex, who's Chinese, and I brought them to both my sets of my grandparents. They were both like, "Oh, she's an Oriental," and that was totally accepted back then. But it's
That was their language, and yes, now it would be racist, right?
yeah, oh yes,
But
yeah,
has anyone
I mean,
ever
it
told
definitely
them?
is.
Have you ever told them that that's not how
Yes,
you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
we talked about it.
But
But it's
after or before the conversation?
after, and
And how did they receive it?
huh, okay,
And did it happen
that
again
was
in the
that was
same
how.
fashion?
No, I wasn't dating her anymore.
That's unfortunate. You probably should have continued dating so we could actually
Uh,
end this conversation with us knowing what happens.
but
Sorry.
but I mean, that is something that I worry. It's a two separate things. I'm worried that with cancel culture, we won't have the right basis to even have those conversations. And the other thing is, I'm wondering if it's, and this is very controversial to say, I'm wondering if it's making our culture a lot more sensitive beyond what it should be.
I don't think we're at that point yet.
Mm-hmm.
But there would be some people who would argue that we're past that point. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that you're not giving yourself enough credit because you're what, 24 now, 23 now? The type of thinking and the sensitivity that you have to other people, it won't change when you're 70. You'll still be, maybe you don't say the right thing, but you'll still have that same compassion. Have that same empathy or sympathy, and you'll be able to change your manner. You're not going to be an old person say, "I'm going to say whatever I want to say because I'm old." I just don't believe that that's the truth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you carry that open-mindedness and willingness to learn that we cultivate now and going forth, that is the antidote.
Which
To an
isn't a
extent.
crutch for you to be racist. That's not what I'm saying. I just don't believe, right? I just don't believe
Hey,
that. I'm just trying to defend
I'm gonna bring
everybody.
this up like 50 years from now. You
When we're
told me
still doing
that
I'm trying to defend the fact that you said when you're older you're going to be racist, and I don't think that's
unintentionally.
Okay, and that's important to say. But the problem now, and I don't want to end the conversation with this, but the problem now is that context is huge. And a lot
Yeah.
of people who are being canceled are being canceled because of things that they've said that potentially have been pulled out of context. Potentially,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
That's just something else to consider.
I think that potentially is really pulling a whole bandwagon behind it.
I'm more so
Yeah,
thinking about the potentially part when the right attacks the left. There's a lot of context that is lost when the right attacks the left for things that they try to bring into conversations. At least in my
sure.
experience, I'm seeing that, which is complete
Yeah,
hypocrisy. But they have to attack somehow, right?
yeah.
Right. Well, and that was the original criticism of cancel culture is that um it becomes political and it's no longer like a thing that can be used to get rid of people who are bad for society, but now it's just a weapon to fight against the guy who's wearing the opposite colored tie.
Yep.
Thank you all for indulging me in that conversation. It can be a I mean, indulging is the wrong word, but this
I
can
feed
be
off of this.
I am full now. But yeah, this can be a tricky subject, especially for 6 dum-dums like us, because it can sound like as we're discussing cancel culture, we're talking about these people saying these horrible things and we're just dismissing it. But I think we walk that line and acknowledge that these people make mistakes, but just addressing how we are able to move forward with having these people who do and say horrible things, and trying to talk about how we can help them learn from them. So thank you all for
and us learn,
that.
Part
Yeah.
of this conversation is us learning as well.
Yeah, we don't have the answers.
Yes.
And we all know that.
Hell no.
It's just us, like I said, just 6 dum-dums figuring it all out together. So, yeah.
Join us on our magical fucking journey.
Yeah. Anyways, seamless transition, last call.
Oh.
Who's got something fun that they did this week?
Well, I'm drinking beer.
All right.
I got one for you. So I went to the Cape with Maddie for Valentine's Day. And I will say, well, that's what the Cape is kinky Cape Cod.
Kinky
Cape
Cape.
Cod. I have a story about Cape Cod that you would love.
What they call it down here, up here,
When I was
around
in
here.
kindergarten.
Do you think when flat earthers they don't say around the
good
globe? Do they say across the globe?
Probably.
Is that what they say?
They have to be
Horizontally here.
Or across the surface? Yeah. Anyways,
Over yonder.
So we went to the Cape. We went down to Sandwich, Massachusetts, and had ourselves a couple of beers on the canal. We went out to a nice little restaurant. Had some seafood. Got your clam chowder. I actually didn't have any clam chowder, but yeah, we went down to Wellfleet, which is a beautiful little town. Beautiful.
Wicked
and,
beautiful.
God, it was gorgeous, hun. Let me tell you. And we went on a little hike and saw the ocean. And let me tell you, all of those like smells and sounds and all of the little indicators in your mind that tell you, we're at the beach and this is the ocean. Man, none of that shit is around in the winter. I mean, we walked along the beach and it was dead calm. I mean, it was the bay too, so it's a lot calmer than the open ocean. But there was like a little bit of wind, a little bit of rain coming in, so it was overcast. There wasn't even any sun. No birds, no
Sounds
fish.
like Maine in the summer.
Hey, shut up.
that has a distinct smell, though, Maine.
Oh, that's true. I'm missing out.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, and man, it's been like 2 weeks. I can't really smell anything, and I've had this lasting cough. Anyways, I'm totally
joke.
I'm kidding. Yeah. But no, it was a beautiful little hike. Got my shoes nice and sandy, and I recommend it for anybody. It was actually quite peaceful, and for all of my jokes, man, there is something really just serotonin inducing about the ocean, and it makes you feel good.
That's awesome.
So I recommend it to everybody.
Well, Owen, when we all come up to Maine, we'll have like a Valentine's romantic weekend.
Yeah.
Yes.
There we go.
We'll wait till it
Yes.
rains a little, and we'll wait till it's cold, and we'll go out for a walk. No, but I
Oh,
feel
we'll make
you.
it happen.
I feel you. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Okay, so to go off of the ocean, yeah, I have some news for this week. Literally, about 2 hours before our call, I got into grad school.
Hey.
Oh my
Hey!
god! Tell us where.
Yeah, so I got accepted to the University of Delaware.
Wow!
Hey, shout out.
That's so exciting.
Nice.
You know, so it's with it's a physical oceanography program, and the project I would be on is either studying like ice flow, like ice shelf melts in Antarctica, or like the physical drivers of penguin ecology in Antarctica. I'm not really sure, but it's gonna be like cold. It's gonna be cold oceanography, which is
Fun. Serotonin, baby.
not what I was saying. Yeah.
And so you're starting this coming fall?
Yeah. I haven't accepted yet. But yeah, I would start in August.
Gotcha.
That's awesome.
Well, congratulations.
So-
Wow.
Yeah, congratulations.
Congrats.
Hey, Evan,
So awesome.
I know of a place kind of near me that hires people with physical oceanography degrees.
Oh yeah, I think I might have heard of one or two of those places up there. They seem
Yeah.
kind of well known.
The
Yeah, it's
hole in the
something like-
woods.
Yeah, it's like Boner Chasm or something, Massachusetts.
What now?
Woods Hole. That's right. That's
Oh,
right.
yeah,
Woods Hole.
Yeah,
I was
that
gonna say,
one.
don't look that up online, folks.
Go to
Boner chasm.
www.bonerchasm. I don't even want to get into that. I don't know what that means.
Anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna go to grad school at Boner Chasm. Everybody, I'll see you there.
That's so cool.
Hey.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
For you.
So otherwise, yeah, I'll be hanging out in DC until August. So come visit.
And where are you living in DC again? What street is it? And what number?
Yeah.
That was the funniest thing when we had to bleep out when you told us your address. I laughed so hard.
No shame at all. It's fine.
Ooh,
Or go ahead, Jake.
I went sledding.
Oh yeah.
Hey,
Yeah,
nice.
this was like the craziest. Well, it wasn't even snowfall. So we got, I think it was like 3 or 4 inches of straight sleet.
Yeah.
And
This past
it,
weekend.
it was the strangest feeling walking on top of it, because it didn't squish down like snow would. It just pushed away from your feet.
Whoa.
And I don't know how else. I think that's the best way to describe it. It was like putting your foot in a bucket full of marbles. These really, really small marbles.
Whoa, dude. Wow.
Putting your foot in the ball pit with really small balls.
Yeah. But sledding on
man.
it was awesome. It was insane. I was sledding with my niece, who's less than 2 years old, and we were just pushing her down this hill, and she was just plopped in.
He was crying the whole time.
No, the most hilarious thing about it is while she was going down, she would scoop up the ice and just start munching on it.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
little slushy.
But yeah, I completely destroyed my hands going down because I wasn't wearing any gloves.
Oh,
Oh
And
my
it's
god.
just like putting your hands in like a putting your
In like
hands
a
in a
bucket of
bucket
marble. Yeah.
bucket full of razor blades.
Marbles.
Yeah, so they're just bleeding. It was bad,
Nice.
but it's fun.
I just imagine the like 2 trails of blood down the snow from your hands.
Well, yeah, I
Down
was
the hill.
trying to stop myself the entire way, and it just didn't work.
It's funny.
That's
Nice.
fun, dude. I'm so happy you did that too.
yeah, I was gonna say, So I would be a little remiss not to include this now after Evan's topic. But in a similar vein, I've heard back recently from Penn State and American universities.
Oh yes.
Affirmatives on Google.
Hey.
Which is cool.
Hey.
Hey,
And you're
hey.
choosing Penn State, right?
we shall see, Nate. We'll see what the financial numbers come back like. But
I'll let you live at my
I have
house
options.
if you need to stay at Penn
Sam,
State.
Sam,
Hey,
I
there
don't
we go.
say I'm biased, but DC is a really cool place, and American is a cool place.
I also don't want to
Yeah,
be
I know
very
biased, but
their
true.
program is really nice.
boy, Nate works over at Penn State, so
Yeah,
He doesn't.
okay,
town.
but Nate, is Pete Buttigieg your neighbor? No, I didn't think so.
Wait a minute. Evan, is Pete Buttigieg your neighbor?
Your neighbor?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, I walked past him and Chasten walking their dog like last week.
No.
Oh shit!
All
Wow.
right. There you go.
Well, I walked past my neighbors this past week.
I saw my neighbors starting a fire in the trunk of their
In
truck.
house. In their house is all burnt.
Yeah, they just had a fire in the bed of their truck, and I saw from outside the window. So take that, Pete Buttigieg.
Well, supposedly on my next door neighbor app, we had a Harrison Ford sighting in my neighborhood.
Whoa.
So
So your next door neighbor app?
yeah, it's basically just
He
a
lives in a bougie area.
Yeah, it's where they talk about the black people walking through the neighborhood.
it's a neighborhood kind of like watch thing, and it's basically everybody just railing on others. It's
See,
horrible.
I told you.
Oh,
That's
Yeah,
good for society, you know?
Yeah, I'm glad people have that outlet.
Your turn.
Awesome. Well, I guess just to wrap it up, I mean, we won't get too into it because we talked about it last week, but first episode of Write That Down, podcast by Nate and myself about being creative and stuff is out now on Spotify and other places that you listen to podcasts. So
Give it a listen. Let
do
us
it.
know what you think.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Every Thursday, I think they'll come out in the morning.
yeah,
there was a moment in that first episode where you like took a break, and it was just like, hey, like if you want to get in touch with us, like here's our email and here's our contact information, and like I don't know why, but it was that, I don't know, just like that edition where I was like, oh shit, like they like made like a really professional thing. Like, oh shit, like what are we doing? Damn.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm gonna
Twitter
ask you
is still
to only
debating, don't
contact me
worry.
through that email from now on, please.
Speaking of which, Jacob, we should really have some more folks reaching out to us on the Brew Crew. I mean, this show is about the people for the people.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, Sam Worley, it's your job to set up a email.
Actually, we have an email.
Do we?
Or there's-
really?
Yeah, because we had to make it when we were starting it up in the first place. We'll have to
All
find
right.
it. We can
We'll have
mention
to
it
find
next
it.
time. I believe it's base the number 2 Brew Crew at Gmail.
Mhm.
We'll have to get back and clarify in the description below.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Send
awesome.
us
Yeah.
send us in the topics that you want us to talk about, and and we'll do them.
And correct us if you think anything we've said is
Yeah.
completely
Yeah,
wrong.
right.
And our inbox will fill up. Yeah.
We're just gonna have
And
to,
if,
we're just gonna have to do an entire hour of correcting ourselves.
Corrections. That's right.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm okay with that.
And if you have any corrections, keep it to yourself.
No, Jacob. No. Bad. What did we just talk about?
All right. Wow. Well, my goal this week was to try to get us back under an hour, and I failed miserably. But I think we had some good conversations, so I'll say it was worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
All
look
right.
forward to next week.
Thanks everybody for joining me, and thanks for listening. Until next time, cheers everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.